It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Pure Performance. You can obviously tell by the voice that this is not Brian Wilson, who typically does the intro. Brian hopefully is fast asleep at the time of the recording. He should be in bed by now. I think it's about midnight, or maybe even after midnight, probably. But I am not here on my own. I actually have another great guest with me, Ash Patel. Ash, thank you so much for being on the show. I know I stumbled across your podcast a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it was interesting. One of my friends, he pointed it out. And then I listened and I checked it out and I said, hey, this would actually be a cool guest on my podcast. Now, I stopped talking and you can start talking because, first of all, thanks for being here again. Can you quickly introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and what is this podcast that I've been listening to?
First of all, Andy, it's a pleasure to be on your show. And unfortunately, couldn't meet Brian, but one day I hope to do that in real life. So I'm Ash Patel, like you mentioned, and I have a podcast as well. It's focused more so on advocating reliability practices. And we recently changed it from just calling it the SREpath podcast. So we're at SREpath.com to the Reliability Enablers podcast, because that's what my aim is, to help people who are trying to enable greater reliability, particularly in the software side of things, to have an impact within their organization. That is an area that I feel is still quite lacking in a lot of situations. Big tech has done a very good job at it because they have robust practices, robust systems based around having engineers work on reliability. But I think more importantly, other organizations that serve us with critical industries, they need to get better at it. And that's my aim, to share ideas so they can join the fun as well.
Ash, thank you for the introduction. I'm just reading off of your LinkedIn page. Folks, by the way, every link that I mentioned, whether it's LinkedIn and also some of the podcast episodes that Ash, you sent over to me, kind of that are touching also on observability, which is a big topic for us. You find all the links in the description of the podcast. But I want to just quickly read here 2 sentences because I really like this. Once upon a time, I ran operations at a healthcare business. Right now, I'm having an extended eat, pray, love moment and focusing on advocating greater reliability in software, because I don't want software to go down every single day in my next gig. And I thought this was a really, great thing to say, because just as Brian and I and many of the listeners that we have, we've been trying for years to really make sure that these critical systems don't go down every time, right? And we are trying to do what we can, depending on which role we are in. Brian and I have a big background in performance engineering and performance testing, so we typically brought systems to a critical state and then trying to figure out where they are breaking and then give this feedback back to the engineers. I think we've seen a shift in where you really think about reliability engineering, like straight or resilience engineering, where you, from the beginning, try to make sure that you're making the right decisions to keep systems reliable. In your world, I mean, you said you went from the SRE podcast to the reliability podcast from a terminology perspective. What has changed for you since you have been in your kind of like eat, pray, love phase of your life? What has changed over the last months and years?
Well, it's been about 18 months, and I can definitely say it's been less stressful, working with a few interesting organizations here and there to help them understand things a little better. And I'm working on some interesting projects here in Australia right now. And that's why Brian couldn't join us. It's 2 a.m. in the Eastern time zone. He's in the Eastern time zone, right?
He's in Denver, so he's mountain time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's
So
still
mountain
it's
time,
it's at least 1 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be midnight or 1 a.m. Yeah, something like that. So yeah, it's it just came about from the fact that you mentioned that Eat, Pray, Love moment just came about from the fact that when I was running operations, I had a whole bunch of other things in my technology portfolio other than just dealing with our software. So to have to deal with it every day, people complaining, end users complaining directly to me every day. We had a fairly flat structure in our organization. So even a cashier or someone who was dealing with billing could reach out to me and say, we're having this problem. And it was becoming annoying. And I'm noticing that our organization was not the only one experiencing this. So many different places that I've been talking with, they're experiencing this right now from the software that they're using, whether it's external, it's internal. It's just something that we need to resolve.
So, but let me help you understand. You said people just came to you. What type of role did you have that everybody knew, I got to go to Ash in case something doesn't feel right?
Director of operations. So
Okay.
essentially, yeah, it wasn't just technology oriented as well. There's also a people side of things as well. So it's a smaller organization. So we wear multiple hats. It's not just saying director of, I started off as a sysadmin. I always thought I would just be a technical dude. And that's not how it pans out in the real world. Sometimes the role molds you into shape rather than the other way around. So there was a lot of a people side of the operations in that organization, working with clinicians, bringing them up to speed. It was a very multifaceted role. I've learned a lot in the 15 years I spent there.
15 years, that's a long tenure for working for a company, yeah.
I mean, you've done the same, right,
I
Andy?
know,
So
I know. It's been 16 and a half. I know, I love it, right? I love my job and I love the company where I am. So that's right. But I think it's still rare, right? Compared to looking at other folks in our industry, there's typically more change. So that's why having 15 years in one organization is quite an achievement. I got a question for you. So looking back into, you mentioned cashiers came to you or different people came to you. Can you give us an overview from a software perspective? What were kind of the most common reasons why systems didn't behave as expected, why they crashed, why they were slow, why they were simply not available, resilient? What are the top reasons?
So some of the reasons I can outline were that there was a disconnect between what the engineers were developing in terms of our internal software and the capabilities of our systems to handle it. So we were doing a combination of on-prem as well as cloud. Once we shifted to cloud, that's actually when the problems worsened.
Yeah.
Funnily enough. Yes. Because the expertise that we had at that time, and we're not talking a very long time ago, we're talking only 6-7 years ago, was very little in terms of cloud computing. When we're trying to bring in people into our space with cloud computing expertise, but they didn't have the domain knowledge. That was the challenge we were having. The people with the domain knowledge didn't have cloud computing expertise. So what they would do is they'll make software with the mindset of, I'm making things for this kind of rack. It's going to go into this kind of rack. And I'm trying to get them into the mindset of, you're actually working with VMs. The ops guys are doing this. You need to be, we had a kind of a you build it, you run it type model. The biggest problem was delineating those shared and owned responsibilities. Even though I'd make it clear, somehow it would all get lost in translation. And it got to the point where I had to codify what everybody was responsible for, to what extent, and how to do it. And I think that's what a lot of organizations, a lot of teams need to be able to not be stepping on each other's toes and saying, well, that's not my job. That should be that person's job. So we were having a lot of issues with the VMs just not being able to handle the load because they were not properly configured to the requirements of our workloads. The code was very inefficient, which I guess is a problem in a lot of environments. And in general, we did not do performance testing at all.
So folks, if you listen to this, also not only Brian, but also folks like Mark Tomlinson, who has actually inspired us to do this podcast about 8 years ago. He's big in performance engineering, and I met him through performance engineering work. It's from my perspective, right? I've been in performance engineering for so long. it's sad to hear that these things still happen, that people are not doing performance testing. And I know it's not always easy, it's not always top on your mind, because you also have a pressure to get your features out. But I think that's also what you're trying to advocate for now, right? Because I hope so, at least. Ash, and please say yes if you're
Yes,
working with
yeah.
organizations. The
Yeah.
performance engineering should be top of mind. That is interesting. So you said VMs not handle the load, code is inefficient. As you moved from on-premise to the cloud, I assume there was also like parts running already in the cloud, communicating back to on-premise. I think that's, I would assume, a common architectural. Yeah. Did you also experience any latency issues that were related with the fact that all of a sudden applications or services had to communicate from one environment into the cloud and back, right? And obviously latency is an issue, throughput, cost, I would assume, was that also an issue for you?
Yes, there was a big issue because we had a dynamic CRM, a bit of a lower end version of a SAP system. We weren't going to spend tens of millions on a system, so we spent actually not much less.
Yeah.
So it was these were boxes sitting on site, and they would communicate with our cloud-based systems. And yes, there was latency. There were latency issues, and sometimes the latency would get bad to the point where end users would complain as to, why am I watching this thing just going, that loading icon? Why am I just watching this thing go round and round in circles for 5-10 minutes? It wasn't just us. I can't fully put it down to the internal people as well. It was a lot of vendor issues as well. So I was doing vendor management as well. So we'd be dealing with external vendors who were not providing adequate service, and they couldn't give answers. Our suppliers as well. In the healthcare space, you deal with a lot of suppliers who also were going through the same issues in change, because they were just used to people sometimes calling in, faxing in things. This will just blow minds of people who are in software engineering. But to this day, in certain industries, people still fax orders in.
Yeah. It's
crazy.
It is crazy. So 15 years of experience in an organization, being responsible for operations, having to deal with the people that complain, obviously in that kind of cloud migration. I think what you said nicely earlier, you were bringing people in that may had some cloud experience, but they had no domain experience, and the other way around. What were some of the things that you then? How did you solve this? Or what modern measures did you take to ease the problem? Did you start to re-architect for the cloud? Did you just try to really optimize the systems for the workloads? What did you do to mitigate some of these issues?
So the first step was to actually look at re-architecture, but of course, as you may know, that's not a simple step with all the spaghetti mess of whatever you already have.
Yeah.
It takes, I'm not talking months, it might be a multi-year project, and for us, that's what it appeared to be. So we decided to educate first. And I think that's probably why I'm doing this now. I'm trying to educate the engineers as to how they can better understand what our needs are, become more intimate with what the users are expecting. So that meant actually getting them for the first time in possibly their lives to actually talk with end users, actually communicate with them and not leave it to, we didn't have PMs because we were doing internal services. So it was a lot of requirements being built by analysts and being sent to developers. It sounds very old school when I say it now, doesn't it?
But it's I mean, for me, the interesting thing, and this is not the first time that I hear this, what you're explaining, talking with the end user, understanding what the real problem of the end user is, that they want software to solve for them, is something that shouldn't need a cloud transformation project where all of a sudden you see things don't go bad. So I mean, it should be basic, common, approach to software engineering. But I do know that this is typically, or in many cases, not the case, that people are actually having the engineers sit down with your end users, like really sit down if it's possible, and then watch them, how they are dealing with the day-to-day tasks. Because I think that then provides also some empathy, right? I mean, you understand where they're struggling and why they're struggling, and I don't know the healthcare business as good, obviously, as you do, but if you then all of a sudden see what impact bad software has, not only on the end user, but probably also, I don't know, a patient or somebody that they are interacting with. And if you feel this the first time as an engineer, I think you have a much better appreciation for really building better quality software.
Well, I can tell you a story that I would then tell some of these engineers just so it really sunk in, it really hit it home with them. Well, I hoped it hit home with them.
Yeah.
Because it was really an emotional situation for me to experience that I was actually there on site at one of the sites. These are primary health services for people with chronic conditions who the government contracts us to provide them. So the general practitioners, physicians would say, all right, this person can have their healthcare optimized. We're having some issues. Can your clinicians look into it and actually provide advice as to how to improve their health condition? So it's quite an advanced practice. And obviously we need to have good technology working to make all of that work effectively. There was a situation on site where a patient, and these are people who may have taken a long bus ride to get to where you are, or they may have had other things going on in their day. People might think they're not busy, but people have things going on in their lives, and they got really upset because the software was not loading. The software just kept crashing out and going slow when it was loading, to the point where this patient just walked out and just said, forget about this. We'll look at it some other time. And this is someone with a chronic health condition that needs our help, that needed our help. And we weren't able to provide them that service because of software not working effectively. And we had the features there, but the performance wasn't there. The uptime wasn't there. If you look at things on a graph, everything might look okay, but then when you're looking at that individual moment in time when that software was not working effectively, that's when you really feel it, if you're there.
Yeah, it's a very powerful story. As sad as it is, hopefully, as you said, it impacted the next line of code that the developers were writing, or reconsidering the importance of performance, of good architecture, of good best practices on how to build resilient systems. Right, that we have a big responsibility in the world with the software that we're creating. I remember I had the luxury situation to spend some time with Kelsey Hightower, a big name in the Kubernetes industry, and he told also a story where he was working for an organization that was in the US. When you are right, when you don't have that high income, you get like not food stamps, but the digital version of food stamps, and you could basically go to the cashier, like you try to go to the supermarket already in a situation where, right, obviously not in a good situation in life if you're depending on this, and then you swipe the card, and there were moments when the system was down, and then so people, right, that are trying to get food for their families cannot pay, and then you have a line of people behind you, and they already see you are already on, these food stamps, and it's not nice, right? And this is why we need to make sure we need to do whatever it takes that at least the stuff that we built and that we are responsible for works as expected.
Yeah, we got to remember we're educated professionals, so we don't possibly consider this, but it's a case of dignity. That situation, that food stamp situation, their dignity was compromised because other people could see that even the food stamp is not working for them. We don't want that to be to be the case.
Yeah, exactly. So Ash, this means your experience in your previous job helped you to understand it's important to educate. That made you create that podcast. How long have you been doing this podcast now? You said 18 months, a little longer?
Yeah, just under 18 months, I'd say. I've been writing on reliability topics since 2021. So a bit
Nice.
longer, yeah.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
should definitely make sure to get all these links out so folks can follow up with your stories, because education is key in our industry and in every industry. Can you, if you think back about the last 18 months, were there some episodes, some guests that you had where you said, hey, this was a really cool and interesting moment, an interesting story? Any episodes that you would like to highlight also for our listeners, maybe to go back in and say, hey, if you are in performance engineering and reliability, then here are a handful of things that you enjoyed in the discussions with your guests.
Well, this year I've been focusing a lot on observability because there are a lot of problems in the space to solve and ways we can improve on them. So I think those are the episodes that are probably the most memorable for me. There are a whole bunch of other people that I spoke with. There was someone who spoke about chaos engineering, Anand Mova. He worked at BMO, which is a very large bank in Canada, and he handled their chaos engineering, resilience engineering. That was a very interesting topic, but I think observability still is top of mind. And I think for me, to me in particular, it is a foundation capability of reliability work, of any operational work. I think you've called it XOps at one point. So observability seems to be foundational to a lot of XOps. It can be like things like AI ops, SRE work, ML ops. Everything needs to have that data in place. And I guess it's fitting that this podcast is related to Dynatrace. So I think we should focus on some of those topics because that was an interesting area, and I've built a more rounded perspective on that particular area than anything else yet.
Cool. Yeah, obviously, observability is something that Brian and we've been living and breathing over the last couple of years. And it's great that you're focusing on this topic. Before, I have a question in mind, but first I want to go back to your previous kind of life when you were head of operations. Did you have proper observability then?
No.
But yeah, you must have had some type of observability, right?
Because we did. But when you say proper observability, I'm thinking about the entire work stream that I've built out and I'm sharing with people. And I'm thinking, whoa, we didn't have that. We didn't have that. We had quite a bit in place. We knew when systems were down, when to respond to issues, what kind of, we had good coverage, fairly good coverage of the 4 golden signals, except for maybe latency. Like I mentioned, performance testing was not to the level that I would hope for, but it was a massive transition. You're going from people working with on-prem to hybrid to then everything is all on the cloud. It's a big shift, all in the span of a couple of years.
Yeah.
It sounds straightforward, but it's not.
Yeah.
So, that was definitely the case, that we didn't have effective observability. So I do want to help whoever wants to have effective observability to do it right. And I've put out a reliability blueprint on the SREpath site. Observability is one of the work streams there, and you can see all the different facets that you need to be mastering to be effective at observability. So be sure to check that out.
Yeah, and as you said, we'll definitely link to this. Every time when I just want to remind people, right, folks, if you listen to this, you may be in a car, in a bus, and or on a plane, wherever you're listening, make sure that you check out the details with all the links. Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Go on.
Oh, no problem at all. So I was going to say that because I've learned a lot from the people that I've spoken with on the podcast, and there's a reason I do the podcast as well. It's a lot from my learning as well. If I were just to passively listen, I probably wouldn't learn as much. I'm one of those people who needs to actively communicate with people, and then that's the most effective way for me to learn when someone's telling me something. So there are a few people that I would like to highlight, and specifically what they've done, if we have time for that.
Yeah, definitely. Please go ahead. This was kind of like I just want to highlight that the same thing for me and Brian, right? We love these podcasts because we learn so much from our guests because they all bring in their perspective on various topics. And it's the best educational piece for us, right? Just learning. Yeah. So please go ahead. Who are the people that crossed your podcast as a guest and that we should know about?
So there are three people who just really put it all together really well for me, and it's at different stages of the observability lifecycle. So the first person is David Cottle, who is a engineering manager at CapitalOne, very large bank in the US. And he's very frank about his views on observability. He did a talk recently at Monitorama, and you should see the slide he put up. I'll see if I can find it. We can put that in the links as well. So essentially, his idea is that there are a lot of delusions around what observability can do and what people think their problems are. So to him, a lot of people have this delusion that they have some kind of scale problem, that they think that they're at that level where they need to have the highest end tooling, that they need to do all kinds of tricky things. And the one thing that I learned from that is that you need to have proper alignment between what your problem actually is and the solution. A lot of people oversell their problem internally, and they end up going for shiny objects or failing in their projects because there's a disconnect between the problem and the solution. Too fancy a solution for too basic a problem is just going to make life hard for everybody. I'm sure you've seen that yourself.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So basically, would that also be interpreted like we have a problem, we don't know exactly what it is, but in order to solve it, we just go the quote unquote easy route by saying we're buying this tool, and then this tool will make it go away. And kind of like not hiding the facts, but kind of avoiding to actually build and architect a proper solution, and just like saying, hey, all these problems will go away if we would buy shiny tool ABC, whatever that is, instead of actually fixing the real problem, which might be completely unrelated to that, right? Because observability may not get you there. I think I not want to talk down the need of observability, right? I think we both know that we need observability, but yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Kind of like, we are at a stage where what I also often see is that people go to conferences. I'm speaking at a lot of conferences, right? And we all get inspired by these speakers. I think most speakers, and that includes me as well, right? We always tell a very nice story. Sometimes we overtell, we make it even look nicer. And like this and this tool can, solve all of our problems. But we sometimes hide the fact that, a lot of other things actually were necessary as well, and that these tools alone didn't solve it. But then if people go to conferences, listen to podcasts like ours, right? And then they say, hey, Ash or Andy, they talked about doing this, and now we need to do this as well. And then all our problems will go away. So please give me the funding. I understand why people may do this, but obviously it will not solve maybe the real problem that people have here.
Well, there was one thing that David said to me, and I want to summarize it because I think it really, I've seen this even with the engineers I worked with. They get excited by the really cool problems or the interesting problems, the ones that require, let's go extreme, the ones that look like they might require quantum computing or something like that, right? Or developing your own AI. Well, I guess that's not as cool now because everyone's doing AI, but 7 years ago, they wanted to almost do an AI, which was like, okay, that's more than what we need. Let's try and actually just solve the actual, and I know it's boring, the actual underlying problem that we're just having. We can fix this in the next 2 or 3 sprints. So how about we do that? And then everyone just kind of looks dejected, but we have to accept that reality. That we need to be focusing on solving the specific problems rather than going for the shiny objects. So going for these chasing windmills, essentially, are we just, actually, that's not the term David used, chasing ghosts in the system?
Could be. You know what? I'm not a native speaker, so I'm pretty sure there's certain proverbs that are out there that I don't know how they are called in English. Yeah. But it sounds interesting. Yeah.
The sad thing is I am a native English speaker, and I sometimes I get stuck with idioms. I'm like, yeah, I think that's the one. I think a lot of people do, and we just wing it, we just try and, it's like, yeah, you get it, right? Yeah, I got it.
So, but solving the boring problems and don't always chase the shiny objects. I think that's an interesting one. Solve the, I mean, boring. I understand from a challenging perspective, it might be boring, but impactful, right? Solve the impactful problems, and don't just chase the shiny objects. And it's an interesting trade-off as well, right? Because obviously you want to keep your engineers happy, so you want to give them also something that is exciting and new, but you cannot just do this for the sake of not focusing and solving the problems that actually advance the business, because in the end, the business is the one that is paying the money to actually have all these people employed. So
Yeah, that was the issue that I was having because I was actually also responsible partially for a balance sheet. So I'm thinking, let's not waste money here, guys
yeah,
and gals. So yeah.
cool. So David, that's an interesting. I need to follow up. I think there's a link. You sent me a link to his podcast. So folks, if you want to hear from David, CapitalOne, very well-known financial entity in Canada or in the US, or at least
In
in
the
North
US,
America.
yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember I met a couple of CapitalOne engineers. It was pre-COVID, when they were talking about how they're doing continuous delivery, because that's another big topic of mine. Now, CapitalOne has been doing some great stuff, and we're very, I would say, they did a lot of things early on with the cloud and with new technology, even being working in a highly regulated industry, right, in finance, and that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. They do some amazing things. We're not wanting to sound like an ad for them, but
Yeah. What's
there's
in
some
your
interesting
wallet?
people working there.
Yeah.
What's that?
What's in your wallet? Wasn't that's their slogan, right? If you look at their ads, I think that's their slogan. What's in your wallet? It's a CapitalOne
I'm
slogan.
not sure. I'm one of those guys who used to skip the ads, record it
Yeah.
or just watch Netflix or just
Yeah.
have ad blockers. So
Yeah.
haven't seen their ads in a long
Long
time.
time, yeah. Cool. So
Yeah.
David was the first one. I think you had a couple more
Yeah.
that you wanted to talk about. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So the second person that I thought of, and I spoke with him very recently, about a month or two ago, Tim Mahoney, and he works as part of the enabling team, observability enablement team at IKEA. So in North America or in the English speaking world would say IKEA.
Yeah.
Yeah, so IKEA. So he brought up some very interesting points. The first one, and I've rarely heard people even talk about this, even engineering managers. Maybe I'm not listening well enough. I don't know. But he mentioned the concept of actually having an effective engineering baseline. What is expected of all the teams and engineers? How often do we talk about engineering baselines? And it's a concept I've heard before, but I haven't heard people say it to me often enough. I think it's important to bring that into mind, that these are the requirements for you to be an effective engineer.
So that means
And
that's interesting, because when you said engineering baseline, the first thing that for me came to mind was, how do we measure the productivity or the effectiveness of engineers? But I guess as you kept talking, it's more like, what is kind of what are the skills and the kind of like, what are engineering practices? What should be the baseline for engineering practices, right? Not necessarily maybe the output. Maybe the output is something that comes with it if you are following these guidelines. But baseline for me immediately triggered engineering productivity, because that's a big topic that I hear a lot right now when we talk about platform engineering. That's another topic that I speak about, where it's all about how can we make developers' lives easier, how can we make them more efficient by reducing things that are not allowing them to contribute to what they should do, like building cool new shiny objects maybe. But sorry, but go ahead. I just like whenever I hear something, sometimes I just need to say something, and sometimes
oh, no problem, no problem. I was actually fascinated listening to that because I think yours is, I would say, a more precise technical approach to looking at engineering baselines. But I was talking with Tim about how this would pan out, and I was interpreting it in a more management perspective because that's where I have been playing for the last, for most of my career. So for me, just to say, okay, we're just measuring things. Yes, okay, we're measuring things, but it's our job as management not to just say we're measuring you on this, we're measuring your productivity. How are we going to make sure that you do reach that number that we're expecting from you?
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to make it happen?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's when we were talking about the baselines, that's what it came across as. And maybe have a listen to that episode
Yeah.
and tell me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
that's what it sounded like. That there are a few things he mentioned, things like that. If I remember correctly, he was saying that observability is not just a checkbox. It's not just, yep, we're done. We've done this, this, and this. We've installed Dynatrace. We've installed this instrumentation. We've done open telemetry. We are now done. So there's that whole fallacy of the maturity model that we wanted to talk past, that like this is always a continuously moving object.
Yeah.
The observability enablement team isn't just a project team. They're not just doing this and then they're going to be done in 2 years' time. They're constantly going to be updating these baselines. I guess the best way to explain the baseline from how I interpreted it would be the numbers that you're seeing, like DORA metrics, are the lagging indicators
Yeah.
in terms of KPIs.
Yeah.
But the leading indicators are going to be things like how many of our teams are actually implementing all the things we need to do in observability through, are they doing this? Are they doing this? Are they actually doing the right tooling? Are they having this process that we brought in last week? How many teams are actually doing that? That is going to directly contribute to how we see our lagging indicators, the DORA metrics. That's how I would see
I
it.
like that. This is, I think, the first time I heard DORA metrics in context of that they are lagging. You're completely right, because if you're doing things right up front, they will benefit the DORA metrics. You cannot just expect the DORA metrics to magically get better without investing upfront. This is like, if we come back to maybe a sports analogy, right? We are expecting a sprinter to make the 100 meters in a certain time, and obviously once they make it, that's great. But how do you get there? It's through training, and giving them right advice, some maybe different styles of running or whatever it is, right? And I think that's the same thing here. So the leading indicators are how we are enabling our engineers to get their job done, how we make sure that they're following the right practices, that they're educated the right way, that they know how to use all these tools, that they know how to do certain things. And this will then, in the end, if everybody's doing the right thing, will impact metrics like DORA, which I also, just funny enough, on the DORA side, I think we both know what DORA means, for us at least, right? It's a DevOps metric, but DORA in Europe right now is the Digital Operations Resiliency Act, so folks don't confuse it. Same
Yes.
acronym. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I wish they actually looked up what DORA means before they created that act in the European Union. But hey, well, we'll figure it out.
Exactly. Cool. So we had David and Tim.
Yeah. So actually, just to double down on that sports analogy, I really liked it. So imagine Usain Bolt at 10 years old or whatever age he started at, being told by his coach, okay, run hard. I'm going to measure you. And every time you run, I expect you to be doing even better than what you did previously. Just that piece of advice. I'm measuring you. Do your magic, because you've got the inbuilt talent. You've had the training to run. You're a natural runner. I'm going to make sure you run a 10-second 100 meters. Nothing else. I don't know how that would work.
No, that's right. I mean, that's why I think it's a great. Thanks for that. Thanks. DORA metrics are a lagging indicator, and we need to invest upfront in the baseline of our engineers, which means we need to help them do the right things, and we need to train them. We need to give them feedback. We need to have teams like teams, right? There are an observability enabling team, which is not a project-based thing, but it's like continuously mentoring, continuously working with engineers to leverage, let's say, the power of observability to get better in their job and find problems earlier, fix them faster. And this translates into better DORA metrics, yeah? Cool.
Exactly. There was one other thing Tim said just before we move on to the next person. The next person is very intriguing as well in how he talks about observability. He actually talks about an area that we don't really think about too often. So we're going to get to Richard's ideas in a second, but Tim from IKEA mentioned the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I didn't hear that at all before he spoke about it. And I'm sure engineers might know about it. I hadn't heard it before, but essentially it's people overestimating their ability to do something, that they think that they're better at something than they actually are. Unfortunately, I've fallen for that previously, where I'm thinking, yeah, I'm good at this. Confidence is good, but then you don't actually do as well. I think we need to be a bit more humble about how good are we at observability. Teams, especially product teams that may be given that responsibility, might not actually be good at observability, and they just need to be okay with it. And then they can follow the engineering baseline and follow the guidance, follow the framework to actually get better and better. Just like how they did at coding. Simple as that.
Yeah. The only thing that I can say to this, maybe this is also why, right, in agile planning, you're playing the planning poker where it's not an individual, but the whole team basically then needs to put in the number and say, how long do we need for this? And hopefully this, unless the team overall is very, is just overestimating the whole themselves, if every member. But ideally, the more people you have in the team, you get a more accurate estimate. But yeah, I can see this, and I think we all fallen into this, right? We always thought that we are much better until, yeah, sure, Kubernetes, I can easily do this until you actually start with it, and then you say, oh, yeah, just watching these 5 YouTube videos didn't solve it.
Yeah. What happened to that cluster? Where did it go?
Exactly. Yeah, it took another break. Oh no, it broke. Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah,
so Richard, huh?
Yeah, Richard Benwell. Yeah, so Richard Benwell was a person who spoke about observability from a different angle. So he has been in the monitoring space for 20 plus years. So he's the CEO of SquaredUp. Now, they are a vendor, but we try to keep that conversation very much focused on the problem rather than talking about anything they do. I'm not too fussed about the ins and outs of what each piece of software does.
No.
How is it going to solve the problem? We have to understand the problem first before we even start looking at solutions. And there's a whole bunch of solutions you can pick for this. His area is boosting your observability data's usability, right? So just scanning through my notes, I found that his insights were quite specifically on the fact that it's not all rainbows and unicorns once you get the data. There's a lot of focus in observability on the technical problems of collecting and storing the data. But then the usability aspect kind of falls in the too hard basket because, well, really, we've done our job, right? It's up to the people who are going to look at the data now to figure it out. But we've got to remember that humans are still the people who are solving problems. And if they're going to be the ones solving the problem, they need to make effective use of that observability data. And the best way to do it is make it easy to make sense of.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Richard because I met him, I'm not sure if it must have been kind of like 2-3 years ago at a conference, and he showed me his stuff that they built with the SquareUp. I think they're doing a lot of cool dashboarding, if I remember, right? That's what they do. So kind of really making the data tell a story, and then, as you said, but I'm taking also a lot of notes here. The usability aspect of observability, that is a really interesting way to phrase it, because we can capture all the data in the world, but if nobody's looking at it, or if nobody knows what this data actually tells them, and I mean, we've been trying to solve this problem with different approaches, right? Automatically detecting patterns, automatically highlighting important data. But yet in the end, right, the question is, who is going to look at this data? Because in every organization, you have different people that need to look into this observability data with different backgrounds, different experiences. And therefore, you need to provide something that is flexible enough to adjust to the individual requirements of every organization and use case.
Exactly. Funny thing you mentioned was that he did some really cool dashboards. The one thing that I learned from him was the key is to make all that data you're visualizing actually meaningful. If you're just putting up pretty graphs and dashboards, you're not helping anybody. But what you really should be asking yourself, and this is something that I'm saying that I've learned from all the conversations that I've had with people in that space, in the visualization space is, will this dashboard actually tell me where the issues are at a glance when I'm not even thinking about looking at the screen, right? People think about creating these dashboards when they've got nothing else going on, right? They're focusing on making that dashboard. But you've got other things on your mind. You're thinking about what's happening at home. You're thinking about the incident that you're looking at right now. You're thinking about your boss's messages. You're thinking about your colleagues' messages. You're looking at emails. You're trying to patch everything together. So you need something that's effective at giving you an effective picture at a glance. That's what the key takeaway I took away from that.
Yeah, and to add to this, right? Somebody builds a dashboard because they have an understanding of the system. But the problem is if they're the only ones that understand what they put on the dashboard, what if they're sick? What if they move on? What if they move on? Somebody else needs to take it over. Dashboards need to be as intuitive as any mobile app that I install, and I need to know how to use this, as you said, right? And what we have been doing is also a little bit of measuring actually which dashboards are even used. Because in the end, if you're building dashboards over dashboard over dashboard, and you maintain them, but nobody ever uses them, right? Because there might be people that building dashboards, but then there's others that consume them. And so simple things like, let's measure which dashboards are used, which dashboards are not used. You can also think about like a thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this dashboard useful? Does it tell you anything? Maybe you just rotate like on a sprint basis, pick a couple of dashboards and show it to people and ask them, is this any meaningful for you? What does this dashboard tell you? And then with this also learn which dashboards are actually not effective because nobody understands what's on there.
Yeah. One tip I would add, and I always used to train my staff on this, was don't ask closed questions. Don't ask a yes or no type question. Always ask for input. So is this dashboard useful for you? People will be like, yes. People will say yes. That's the problem we used to have. Yes, it's useful. And then later on, I'll be like, hey, I can't figure out how to use this dashboard. Used to happen far too often.
Yeah. So you want to ask a question like, what does this dashboard tell you?
Yeah. It's almost like an exam.
Yeah.
As scary as that might sound to put people in that situation, keep it casual. Hey, what do you think this dashboard is showing you right now? Can you just give me an interpretation? I'm trying to figure out if people are able to understand it well.
Cool. Hey, Ash, thank you so much for 3 episodes. David, Tim, Richard. The links are in the description of the podcast. It's really great that, I also love podcasting, so do you. And so, keep going, keep doing this. We hope that some of our listeners will, tune into some of your episodes because it clearly sounds like some great content. I know you told me earlier that thanks to the podcast now, people are being made aware of what you do and who you are and that you're passionate about this. And you're actually actively be brought in and contacted by organizations that need some help on this. And just want to confirm that. So in case people are, having a need of an expert,
yes,
just want to make sure if they can reach out to you. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm enjoying the beautiful weather in Australia for, I think it might be a while. So if any, it'll take probably a bigger issue for me to want to go anywhere else at this point. But always happy to have a conversation with people who just need a bit of guidance as to what's happening in their reliability journey. And thank you, Andy, for having me on, and love what you do here.
Thank you so much. And Brian, sorry that you could not take part of this conversation today. Hopefully you had a chance to listen to it though. And I will make sure, this should probably air, not actually in about 2 weeks. We always record where we have a little bit of backlog, but I think in 2 weeks this will air. So that means at early July, people will be able to listen to this, and hopefully then you will see some traction on your podcast, and also hopefully some people will reach out. And while you are in Australia, the world is a small place. The world is connected. So folks, don't shy away, even if you are somewhere completely remote from Australia. Ping Ash, great connection to have.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, any final words, Ash, before we close this episode?
No, I think that's it. That's all, I think, Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right.
I also am a salsa dancer, by the way. That was
Really?
interesting. Yeah,
What do you do? On one, on two, Cuban? What do you do?
Cuban.
Cuban. Nice.
Yeah, it's quite rare, but it's the thing that gets me going.
Yeah, cool. How long have you been dancing?
10 years.
10 years. Nice.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, you met your wife
I did.
in
In
on the
Boston.
dance floor. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's Colombian, so she obviously knows her stuff. But yeah, it seems I made an impression when I met her, and she definitely then after the second time dancing, she accepted my request to ask her out, and 7 years later, 7 years married. That's worked out pretty well.
Amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. Like, has she tried to get you to learn the Colombian way?
It's a little bit too fast for me, to be honest with you.
Yes.
And also she learned it. She learned a different type of salsa than we do when we go to dance clubs here. But now we enjoy it very much.
Oh, well, so what style do you do?
I also started Cuban in the very beginning, then did some rueda, but then I switched over to on one. I just I dance whatever I don't care in the end, but I've on one is my favorite.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna actually take lessons for on one just to be more versatile rather than just sitting out when follow all the followers only know on one.
Yeah. Well, definitely I'll be calling you next time when I am in Australia. I remember my first couple of trips, I always went dancing in Sydney, but obviously things have changed. I think with the pandemic, which clubs are still out there and which ones are new. So yeah, that's good to know. Good to know to have a salsero around the corner when I make it down to Australia.
Amigo de salsa, amigo de salsero, sí.
¿Tú hablas español también?
Sí, yo hablo español, pero algunas veces está muy difícil porque nadie habla español aquí en Australia.
Sí, yo entiendo.
Sí. ¿Y tú hablas? ¿Sí?
Sí, un poco, porque mi esposa es colombiana. Pero solo aprendo con Duolingo. And you know what the funny thing is? We're still recording, and this is still probably going to be on the show. So let's see who is listening until the very end. Folks, if you listen till the very end, and if you hear us talk about salsa and a little bit of Spanish talking, make a comment on LinkedIn or wherever you find this on the podcast. It would be funny to see who else is dancing salsa out there.
That'll be awesome. That'll be amazing.
All right. Hey, with this, I need to say goodbye. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Stop the recording. But until next time, it was a pleasure having you.
For sure. Appreciate it, Andy. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.